Welcome, everyone. I am Shasta Grant, co-founder of Brown Bag Lit, along with Chloe Yelena Miller. We host classes, events, and are home to Lunch Break Writers, a writing accountability group. You can find more information about our programming on our website. This is the second session of our third annual Fake AWP series. We are happy to host two Washington Writers Publishing House memoirists, Megan Doney and Dine Watson. If you haven't signed up for the next two Fake AWP events yet, we'd love to have you. Tonight, we'll be hosting editors to discuss the best submission practices, and tomorrow we're hosting two booksellers to share the life of a published book in a bookstore. You can find previous event recordings on our YouTube channel. All of the links will be in the chat. Throughout this session, you're welcome to put questions directly into the chat, or you can raise your hand. While the presenters are talking, we ask that you stay muted. Megan and Dean will each speak for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. And please note that we are recording this event. And now I will turn it over to Megan.
Hey everyone, this is so amazing. Thank you so much for being willing to spend some of your lunchtime, or for some of you on the West Coast, your breakfast time with us. I am going to go ahead and read just a little bit from my book, which is called Unarmed, an American Educator's Memoir. And it was the 2024 Nonfiction Prize winner at the Washington Writers Publishing House. Okay. So this is from the very first kind of full chapter, which is titled Doors. When I teach my students how to write strong introductions, I use the metaphor of a door. Our job as writers is to create a door that's intriguing, welcoming, something that makes our readers so curious that they want to open it, sit down, have some tea, and explore the rest of the house. I have a few slides of stock photos of front doors, one painted crimson, fringed with flower beds and mullioned windows, an entrance to a seemingly enchanted cottage, alongside another that's scrawled with graffiti and hanging off its hinges, revealing a shadowy interior. The introduction paragraph sets up the conflict, shows us who or what we should care about, I remind them. How can we ensure our readers will walk through that door and stick with us for the rest of the essay? You can't move backwards through the doors. They only propel forward momentum. There's no return. Behind door number 1, Friday, April 12th, 2013. I am 38 years old and a full-time professor at New River Community College in Virginia. This semester, I teach at the Satellite Campus in Christiansburg, which is in the local shopping mall and occupies the space that was once a movie theater. The lecture auditoriums still have that feel, with a sloping center aisle and a large screen at the front. I've been separated from my husband, Tom, since October, and this afternoon I have an appointment with a lawyer in town to begin formal divorce proceedings. In a meeting with my therapist 3 days earlier, I told her that I really felt like I was doing fine. I think I'm going to be okay, I said. I don't think I need to see you every week anymore. I agree, she said. I think you were farther along in the grieving process than you thought you were. That doesn't mean, however, that the grief doesn't still pound me, or that I'm always proud of how I handle things. To my shame, I spend part of my lunch break Googling my soon-to-be ex-husband's affair partner and send a woeful email to my best friends. I am sick of her, of him, of the space they both continue to occupy in my mind. But my father is coming to visit me tonight, stopping on his way to the Outer Banks, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. I've left my little house unlocked so that in case he arrives before my workday is over, he can go in and maybe take my dog for a walk. My afternoon class is English 112, the second semester of college composition. I love this class. My students are so smart and funny and thoughtful. All of the units in the course are oriented around an inquiry question, and the unit we've just finished asked, what does it mean to be safe? We read and discussed the intentions and impacts of drug policy, anti-bullying measures in school, and a recent article from The Atlantic arguing for more guns in the hands of civilians. They've just turned in the unit papers, which means I have long days of grading ahead of me. Still, I look forward to reading their work. Being with them is a perfect way to end the week. We're starting today on the final unit for the semester, in which we're going to interrogate the question, what are our responsibilities to other people? To begin the unit, I'm going to show a segment from When the Levees Broke, Spike Lee's documentary about Hurricane Katrina. We will be reading the New York Times article about Memorial Hospital, where some physicians administered lethal doses of painkiller to patients they thought would not survive. I slide my DVD into the machine, cue it up, adjust the volume, and sit in the swivel chair behind the instructor console at the front of the room. The flooded, haunted streets of New Orleans fill the screen. There is a loud, sharp bang. What was that? One of my students asks this. It must be a car backfiring, I think. I rise from my chair at the computer console and walk over to the classroom door. I open it. 2 more shots. I know what they are. And I'm just going to end there in the interest of time.
So, Megan, the question of what does it mean to be safe is something that sort of stuck out for me as you were reading. And I wonder if that's a question that propelled the writing of the book. Is it something that you've had to deal with throughout your life, or just how did you come up with that focus to focus on with your students?
I honestly don't remember how I came up with that as a theme for class, but it certainly was one of the major things that preoccupied me during the writing of the book as I got further and further in, because the book touches on violence in the home, in private relationships where you believe that you are safe with your partner, but also in public spaces. Like, I certainly did not ever think that my classroom was unsafe, except maybe in a, sort of an intellectual level where you could take risks to, make, arguments or things like that. I certainly did not ever think about it as the site of violence in this, in this way. I
Mm-hmm.
think that thread, I hope, runs through the whole thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, should
You
I
want
just
to go
go
ahead
ahead
and
now?
yeah, let's go. Do you want to go
Okay,
ahead and switch to you? Do you want to read first?
sure.
Okay.
No, I'm going to talk a little bit
Okay.
and then I'll read first.
Okay.
Because your question of what it means to be safe is not the same question that I was asking myself as I wrote my book, or sort of kind of as a question that I carry around with me. But what does it mean to be yourself? Was my question. And my book, Transplant, which was the 2023 nonfiction winner from WWPH, is the story of my experience with kidney disease. And I've had 2 transplants and spent 5 years on dialysis. And before I talk about how I wrote the book, I'll talk a little bit about why, I wrote it. And one, that whole issue of what does it mean to be myself, I felt like the book was my coming out kind of as a human and as a writer. Um, I was diagnosed with kidney disease in 1984 and told almost no one. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed to be sick. I didn't tell anyone that I had kidney disease or had been on dialysis until after my second transplant in 2009, when I was just tired of hiding and just wanted to come out as myself and to be, proud of my whole self and who I was. I think the other coming out was my coming out as a writer. I'd always written. I had jobs as a writer. My career was in writing about social policy, but in terms of concept papers, proposals, I wrote for foundations, but I also felt like a writer writes books, and I wanted to write a book. So this book was kind of my uh, compelling for me to come out, a vehicle for me to come out and write a book, which I always wanted to do. So my how to write. I think first, should I go on and talk about how to write, or should we let people ask those questions, or Chloe? I think I'm just going to go on and keep
Yeah.
talking. About how I wrote. I think that first of all, I just decided that writing this book was the most important thing in the world to me. More important than my kids, more important than my husband. Just ask him. Once I start writing, don't bother me.
Mhm.
I also thought it was really important for me to surround myself with writers who knew more about writing than I did, and who knew more about publishing. I couldn't find a memoir group at the time, but I joined a poetry group just to one because I also wrote poetry, but just to be in the room with writers. I started going to readings. I started reading other people's memoirs, which was peer pressure. I thought, like if they can do it, I can do it too. And I also found a writing coach who believed in my writing and believed in the story I was trying to tell. As we were talking about earlier, publishing is a little bit harder. I got the names of agents from my writing community, but I got no takers. Um, Agents told me that I was not known by anyone and I needed to be a doctor to write about this subject. But the book was really very much a story about my own personal experience. So I thought I was experienced enough to write the book, but I just got no takers for agents. And so from my writing community, I started to hear about small presses. And I heard about the Washington Writers Publishing House. And it seems to me that looking for small presses is really a good process because you're more likely to find presses that are interested in kind of unique stories and unique voices. In fact, the Washington Writers Publishing House told me that I had a unique voice, and I didn't even know that I had a writing voice. So that was really important and encouraging to me. So I think those are, how I came to write a book, to sort of accept that I wanted to write. I wanted it more than anything, that I began to surround myself with writers. I got a lot of discipline from that process. And then to find people who would help me uh, to get the book out and look for small presses that were interested in me and my writing. So, do we have any other questions?
So following what you were just saying, Dean, I was wondering, you're telling your own story. You're both of you are telling your own story. Megan has more kind of outside research that weaves in, but were there times where you were sort of questioning how truthful to be about these intimate experiences? And you both are really honest about things that you did right, things you might have changed with, hindsight is always 2020, and the kinds of your books are deeply honest and how you were able to make those choices to put all of that into the book for the public. Whoever wants to start first.
Megan, you want to go?
Um, I mean, I was incredibly excited, and happy when, when Caroline from the publishing house called to say, congratulations, like you've won this. But, as the publication got closer and closer, I definitely felt a little bit ill with like the idea of this kind of all being really out there for everyone. And I mean there's other material that didn't make it into the book that's kind of even more, private, I guess. And yes, I think that was a hard thing for me because I was writing not just about myself, but also about other people, like at least two other people who I had to felt like I, definitely owed something to, and needed to take into account as well. So yeah, that always preoccupied me.
Yeah. Well, In response to that question, I think I'll read a little bit from my book, which I forgot I was supposed
Good,
to
yes,
do,
do that.
earlier. Okay. Well, I'm going to read a little bit about my background and my family, which talks a little bit about why I did not say anything to people when I was ill. Ain't nobody's business was the unspoken and, when necessary, spoken mantra in my family. My father, Bernard, often told us, "What happens in this house stays here." There would be hell to pay if he ever heard any one of us putting family business in the street. Of course, there was always gossip, but engaging in too much idle prattle could be dangerous to your well being. My Aunt Betty once punched our neighbor, Miss Louise, in the face and sent her to the hospital for gossiping about some nefarious activities she'd seen going on in my aunt's house. She should have stayed out of my business, was the only reason Aunt Betty ever gave for the assault. When I think back on the people I grew up with their attitudes about others poking around in their private affairs, that makes sense to me. Most in my family and community didn't have much more than their pride, and they wanted to keep it. Life was hard enough without everyone knowing your ups and downs, offering their 2 cents about how you ought to live your life, or even worse, using the information to make you feel lower than you already did. This philosophy and way of life, which molded me as a child, influenced the way I lived my life as an adult and faced my disease. So I didn't start out wanting to be honest in my book. In fact, my whole upbringing was to not be honest and tell anybody everything that was going on with you. But I had come to a point in my life where I wanted people to know who I was inside. Not everything, but I wanted to not be afraid to be who I was and to reveal that I had had this health background. But my my coach, who is a woman, I don't know if people know her, but she's a woman who's written a number of books, Marita Golden. She encouraged me to be as honest as possible because she said, one, that'll make you more sympathetic to the audience, and someone and other people are always going through things and they may not say it, but they want somebody else to be brave enough to say it. So she thought that being honest in the book would elevate the story. And I mean, I talked about, everything that happened to me just about while I was going through kidney disease. You lose the ability to pee, my scars, getting sick in the center, I mean, a lot. And there were some moments after the book was out when I thought, everybody who's reading this book and looking at me, is thinking about these things. And actually, some people have asked me about some of that. But I consider it kind of a maturation process that I've gone through, that I don't have to be ashamed or bothered about things that have happened in my life because, you know, everything happens to somebody. You may not know it, they may be hiding it, but it's out there.
And Dean and I had a conversation 2 days ago, before this, just kind of trying to plot out our, our how to introduce the conversation. And she pointed out, that I think that both of our books kind of spring from a traumatic experience, but we also talked a little bit about sort of the private versus the public. And in your reading just now, Dean, I think you really highlighted how close you kept a lot of your illness and why. And
Mhm.
for me, like, there was media like with a microphone in my face, like literally as I'm standing outside my school where people are being shot inside. Like they were in, what can you tell us what happened? And I was like, get the hell out of here. Like what is, my picture was in the, my photo was in the newspapers. There's a scene later on in the book where I talk about going, I think 3 years later to a faculty development seminar, and there's a photo of me in someone else's PowerPoint. Like they don't know that I'm in the group, but like I'm looking at this PowerPoint come up and there's my photo, like there's me in this. And so it's this, it was like the aftermath, I think was very, very private, but the incident, you know, the precipitating incident was extremely public. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about how that, I think, I don't know, maybe informs how and why you feel like you need to give voice to this situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's lots of good questions. Should we try to hit some of the questions in the chat too?
Sure. There are two good
Okay.
questions about vulnerability. Amy asked how you decided to draw the line with your personal vulnerability. And then Maggie was asking about strategies that you use to overcome your training in traditional non-creative writing. And then how you learn to become vulnerable in your writing.
Well, yeah, the kind of writing I was doing before I wrote Transplant was, kind of, it wasn't necessarily technical writing, but it was writing about issues, things, some that I had experienced myself because I wrote about community and youth development, those kinds, community organizing, and how policy should address those things. And, I had experienced some of that, but it wasn't about me personally. I think that the reason I was able to become more vulnerable, one, I had a lot of encouragement. I don't know if I would have done it without someone else reading the book and saying, lift this up in terms of how vulnerable you are in the book. I think that helped a lot because it definitely was not my all of that was not my initial inclination, but I was also driven. I came from a big family where not necessarily you as an individual were always seen, and you were also told to, sort of to be quiet. And I really had a big interest in just being more open because I felt like it made me feel better as a human.
Um, so with regard to the question about, our training and again, like learning how to put the vulnerable into there. I mean, I don't think I don't have that exact kind of background that Dean does. I'm a community college English professor. So I teach, freshman comp, creative writing, literature, stuff like that. So, and my graduate work is in creative writing. So, I think I was always kind of, more willing to sort of go there in some of those places. You know, uh, but I think too, like one of the precipitating events in the aftermath of the shooting that really kind of propelled me to write this was that, and we were talking about this before the group, before this meeting started, that, there were no, in 2013, there were no memoirs by Educator survivors. And to my knowledge, there still isn't. Like, I think that mine is the only one that I know of. We can just say that there. And I was really devastated to find that out because I thought, like, it was 2013, it's not like this hadn't happened before. How was it possible that no one had written about this? And I genuinely thought, like, maybe all of those people leave teaching,
Mhm.
or or something really dreadful happens to them. And I felt like I kind of had to give a voice to the reality of what the aftermath for me, which is just, it's just so much different. I don't even know how to describe it, but that I think that anyone could have told me. Like, I just, and I wanted people to understand, like, it didn't just end that day. Like, it ended in one way, but the worst part really is living in a culture that won't do anything to stop it.
Mhm.
That's the worst of this. I feel like in some ways, like if the shooting had happened and then there were never any school shootings ever again, that would be one thing. But the fact that, you know, I live in a country that kind of seems to insist on letting it happen over and over again, that is the devastation. And I want people to understand what that really means. So.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. I want to address to the whole issue of going from being a sort of a uh, kind of a technical issues writer to a creative writer. And I don't know that I knew this was happening while I was writing the book or after it, but I I think I'm a creative person. I mean, I think that you know, if you came to my house or people tell me the way I dress or whatever, that I present as a creative person. But in my career, I did not have, I think writing is obviously creative, but I didn't have that outlet to really explore creativity. And so the book was really a vehicle for me to be more creative, and actually to be more, you know, myself. So I really appreciated the opportunity to have that. But you talked about Megan, about feeling that your book was really needed in the field because there were none. And I didn't really realize the need for my book until after I had written it and it was out there, and I started hearing from places like the National Kidney Foundation or an organization like NEFCure. They started, which deals with families and kidney disease, that started to invite me to talk. And then I really started to see that there was a need in the community for somebody that was willing to kind of lay it all out there for other people who were going through this, and especially African American people, because we're like something like 13% of the population, but a third of the people who get kidney disease and are on dialysis. So I didn't find out until I didn't start out wanting to kind of do a service um, to society um, about kidney disease, but some of that has become a part of my life. In fact, I have to, for myself, kind of draw a line because I don't want to just talk about kidney disease all the time. I'm a writer, you know, I'm a creative person. So sometimes I have to still draw that line of going out and just talking about it, and getting onto my own life as a writer. Any other questions?
There was
Mm.
one um, about writing about people who have behaved badly and maybe not don't want to be written about. Which I appreciate that because I certainly worried about that a lot. I still do in writing about some things that happened in a previous marriage and everything. And I went to great lengths to elide a lot of details, identifying details and things like that. And I don't know that, I don't know what the, I wish I knew what a good answer was for that. But I also think that, I was consumed by shame that that marriage was failing. And I felt like there was no way that I could say some of the things that were happening. And but they kind of had to be said in order to see the whole thing. Like it was, so that's a really squishy answer. I don't know how to, I wish I could, I don't know. If you want, I'll make a recommendation. The memoir is Kelly Sundberg. I don't know if people know her, but her first book is called Goodbye, Sweet Girl, and she has a new one coming out as well. And she's written not just, so she writes not just about another person like in that book, but she's also written about him on her blog and things too. And she wrestles, yeah, that's great. And she wrestles with this very openly and thoughtfully, I think. So I would recommend her. I would point you toward her as someone's work to consider.
And building on that, and then also for Dean, did you, Megan, ask anyone permission or ask them to read a draft at any point, those who were mentioned in the memoir, or was it your own choices about what to include?
Well,
Go ahead, Dean. Yeah.
okay. I did interview people in my family because my older sister was my first kidney donor. So I felt like I wanted to interview and needed to interview her. I just interviewed people that were key in the story, not to ask their permission, but to one, let them know I was doing a book, and two, to ask for their insights about things. And I found that some people had different insights than I did. But what was really clear to me, and again, I have to give some credit to my coach, is that this was my story. And she recommended a book for me to read, and I cannot think of the name of the book, but it was very popular, and it's about a woman who came. Tara Westover is her
Oh,
name. She wrote a book. I can't think of the name of the book right now, but she was coming out of a very religious, oppressive family, and she actually wrote about how there were she talked to her brother who was featured in the book, and he had done some horrific things, and she put them in the book, and he said, well, I wasn't even there at that time, and but that was her memory
mhm.
of him being there. So she put it in the book, and you have to just take responsibility, for your own memories. And the other thing I'll say about that is that there's someone in my family who promised to give me a kidney and dropped out 2 weeks before the surgery. Um, and I wrote about it was devastating. And our family is still not quite right. And this was some years ago. Because of that, she and I don't have a great relationship. And she's, very let's just say in my immediate family. I did not mention her name. I just said that it happened because there was a point where I didn't really, want to cause a whole nother round of family drama and hurt for people. So there are times when I did draw a line about things. When there are other times when people gave me permission. There was another woman who said she wanted to give me a kidney, and she had gone through the whole process of being tested and so on. And then turned out that she had back issues, and her doctor advised against it. And she was devastated. And so I called her, I talked to her, I interviewed her, and she said, tell the story, use my name. People need to know that this stuff happens. And in fact, it happens quite a lot. I When I went to the doctor and I said, my donor dropped out, and they said, well, we'll just start over because this happens. So
I I did, I did not ask permission. But before the book came out, I met with someone and said, I want you to know that this is coming out here. And you know, um, I did the best I could to tell things, the way that I recalled them. And uh that person was incredibly magnanimous. It was, yeah, it was really,
yeah,
it was great. It was,
yeah.
it was a real weight off my conscience and my shoulders. Yeah.
Well, I'll also say that I write a lot in the book about my father, and we did not have a great relationship. I wrote about one big blow up that we had, which kind of was the kind of stands for the kind of relationship that we had throughout my childhood and adulthood. And he died in 1999, way before the book came out. Now, people have asked me if I thought I could write it the same way if he was still here, and I don't know the answer to that question because he was a fierce person. And, I'm too old for him to punish me or anything, but I don't think that he would have liked it. And I don't know if I would have done it, honestly, in the same way. I don't know if I would have talked about him or told that story in the same way.
Thank you. I saw that Fernando had his hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah.
I think you're on mute, Fernando.
Yeah.
Fernando.
I can't hear. I'm so sorry.
I can't, nobody's saying anything.
I think you keep, I see you unmute and then it mutes again. Or you can type it if you like, but I bet you can unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I had it clicked on the wrong thing. This is a topic or two ago, so is that okay? It's about vulnerability and the question of Maggie. What strategies did the speaker use to overcome? Is that still okay to contribute to that? Yeah. The
Sure.
thing, I also have a background of writing. I'm an economist by background. I still consult as an economist. But I got into creative writing 10, 15 years ago, thanks to Chloe, my teacher. uh, and taking courses with her. Yeah, it was very difficult for me to start getting vulnerable. But what I found after years of, writing essays and so on, and publishing a bit in literary journals, is that um, the vulnerabilities were more easily addressed when I was very clear, and I'm much more clear now than then when I started about what question is it that has been bothering me that I want to answer. Because once I have a driver, then I'm able to, first of all, what are my vulnerabilities? What are they? And for me, I didn't know all of them. I thought my only vulnerability was racial. Like I was very conscious about being an Asian in America and that kind of thing. But once I had that question and I wanted to keep answering it because I didn't know. That's why I'm asking it. That's why now I'm ending up drafting a memoir book project because I'm still trying to answer it. Then a lot of the categories of vulnerabilities came out. The questions under each category of vulnerability, it keeps on expanding. And how much to reveal and so on. So just in a nutshell, my sort of big question is how on earth did I end up buying so much and uh, believing so much in America as the land of the free and a land of plenty and all that, to the point that I kind of identified as someone who would like to assimilate and become a successful US immigrant and to make this my home. And then Zoom later on, decades later, related to this question is this now my home? Am I home? And so when this question started itching 10, 15 years ago, what came out was essays on nostalgia about a lot of friends in the Philippines where I came from. And I didn't know what question I was asking. I was just feeling nostalgic. Oh, I miss Angie, I miss Molly, and I started writing little things that got published in literary journals about people I missed and places I missed, but I didn't know how they hung together. And then later on, as these things keep on simmering, I said, oh my gosh, I'm missing my roots.
Mm-hmm.
I am doubting my presence here in the United States and my sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Where do I belong? And so then I don't want to sort of elaborate too much here. So now I'm on that journey whereby I'm addressing vulnerabilities. And I'll just give one example of a vulnerability that I have been trying to deny. And a lot of things are coming out that I have to be careful of, because then the issue of hurting family comes out. And that one vulnerability is, why did I leave in the first place? What did I want to leave behind? Was I trying to escape? And so family comes in, which I didn't know before. As I said,
Mhm.
I thought it was just my sensitivities here were just about race. But then there was the past about family, and things come out and bubble up about things that have happened and so on. And then issues come about hurting people who were involved in those hurtful things, that you need their permission. So it works, the agenda works it out for you if you have a driver, something that is so powerful that you want to answer and you don't have the answer for. Sorry, that's kind
Yeah.
of my very indirect way of answering Maggie's question, which is fascinating. I thought it's an excellent question.
Yeah. I think that your recognition of the question, am I home, is a fascinating one. I mean, that seems to me like a real driver. That once you ask that question, it opens up a lot of things about, because if you don't know whether you're home or not, you can feel vulnerable, very vulnerable. Um, I think that my vulnerabilities that I got in touch with in writing the book were fear and anger. And I had to really um, ask myself, what really was I afraid of? And what was I so angry about? And I took both of those vulnerabilities into my illness with me, but they were already there. And writing the book, I got to sort of explore a lot of my fears, about living in America, about being an African American, about being vulnerable to the medical system that wasn't necessarily going to take, good care of me, about being somewhat estranged from my family and why, and my anger about being sick and being in this group of sick people that America really doesn't care about. Just about everybody in the dialysis center was Black and from what I could see, poor. And that's what I had come from, being poor. And I thought I was over it. But I found out that I wasn't. I mean, that I found out that I was still going to be in an environment where I had to face myself and face my and that dialysis center really was kind of a microcosm of that for me, that I had to really get in touch with so that I could be calm and present enough to get through what I had to go through, which was a healing, which was to get myself well. So I think that, coming into contact with your vulnerabilities, writing is, I think, oh gosh, I was talking to some friends the other day, writing as healing. Writing as healing is something I think that we really need to think about if we're writers, because if you're honest, you can get in touch with some very, very important vulnerabilities and figure out, how to deal with them.
Thanks.
Hmm.
I really like what both Dean and Megan have said about starting off with questions in order to help focus the text. And I see that Caroline Brock is here, and she is the co-president and prose editor from the Washington Writers Publishing House. And Caroline, I was wondering if you would like to say a few words about both what you're looking for when you're reading these books that then get published, and kind of how far the frame around that central question can reach in a memoir that you would be interested in, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure, Chloe. Well, first of all, I'm sorry I'm late. I love coming in on Dean and talking about writing is healing. I know both Dean and Megan have both said that to me as we went through the editing process. I was the key editor on both of their books. We just started creative nonfiction as a category with Dean's book 2 years ago. Going forward, we are going to alternate it with translation. We are a very small press, the Washington Writers Publishing House, and we think we could do really well with 3 books a year. So we will definitely come back to publishing memoirs in 2026. But I look for that voice that is exploring the key questions, whatever those questions are, as Dean said. If the question is, how do I deal with my fear and anger? She did it by going deep into her own personal experiences with the American medical system, which is broken, we all know. Megan went deep into how could this school shooting happen in this beautiful rural area in Christiansburg, and how do I process it? And it was also deep and lyrical. So we're looking for voices that have a lyricism, but that are asking those deep personal questions in our narrative. We're not the only press. I know that in the region, if people are here from the DC area, there are a number of small presses looking for memoirs. One that I know is coming out from the Santa Fe Publishing Group. Do not mistake their name for being not a DC. They're actually based in Bethesda, WP or PW. It's Andrew Gifford. His team is publishing memoirs. He has one coming out in the later this year. There's a new group that I just interviewed. One thing I do is a column for the Washington Independent Review of Books called Small Talk. It's called Modern Artist. It's a brand new press out of Virginia. They're looking for manuscripts and will consider memoir. So there are a lot of small presses eager for memoir. Does that help, Chloe?
That's excellent. Thank you so much, and thanks for coming. Dean and Megan, if you could speak a little bit about the submission process, maybe kind of, obviously we know where you landed, but what it was like on your way there.
So I actually did have agents. I signed on with an agent in 2020. So I found this person, if I'm remembering correctly, I think we connected through PitMad on Twitter. Like I found her on Twitter, and then we were both going to be at AWP. So this was the AWP in San Antonio in March 2020, and so it was right before everything. Just like, right, I see your face. It's like everything kind of skidded to a halt, and there were tons of empty sessions and everything. But we met at that AWP, and I signed with that agency, and we put together a lot of nonfiction is sold on proposal, even not necessarily on the full, having the full draft done. So we worked for a long time on a proposal. Then she started sending it out on submission, and we got a lot of feedback like, this is really beautiful and really important, and I can't sell it. I don't understand where this book sits on the shelf. I don't know, gun books don't sell, grief books don't sell. I don't understand what this really is. And I kind of felt like, well, I don't know how to, that is very unhelpful advice from a writer perspective. Like, I cannot revise for you to sell it. Like, tell me if the organization is off, if the point of view is weird, whatever, like I can work with that, but like, your job is to sell it. Like, I can't do anything about that. That agent left the business entirely. And she connected me with someone else. So I wound up signing with that person, and we were together for another year. Same, out on submission again, same thing, like basically the same comments and everything. And then that, when that contract connection, whatever, also came to an end, that was in October of 2023. And at that point, I had a entire proposal and basically a finished book too. And so then I started sending it to small presses, to companies that would take like an unagented submission, because frankly, the book had taken so much out of me that I was like, I have to be done with this. Like, I cannot work on this anymore. And I told myself, like, I'm gonna submit like mad until December 31st, 2023, and then I'm done. I'm not doing anything else with this. Like, after that, after starting in 2024, I'm done. Um, and then Caroline called in January of 2024. And I was like, so yeah, and I found the contest on Submittable. I put that in the chat, I think. So I know people use different platforms, but I used Submittable to find, call where this journal is looking for essays on this subject or whatever. And so that was where I found WWPH, actually. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
the journey in a quick nutshell.
I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I wrote the book. I got advice on agents from my sort of writing community, but I had no luck with agents at all. They told me that they didn't know how they would sell this book. And I did a book proposal that was, I'm a researcher by training, so it was well researched. And I sent it out to several agents and there were no takers. And I think through the writing community that I had built up, I found out about Washington Writers Publishing House. I did not know about the organization. I had no sense that I would win or that anyone would like the book because I had been told that, it wasn't sellable. And but when I heard from Carolyn, which I think was in February of 2023, I was floored. But like I said earlier, she told me that they liked my voice. And that was so um, just affirming because, as I said, I didn't realize that I had a specific way of writing creatively and approaching. I sort of realize it now, but I'm glad to have that confirmation because it's no, it's affirming. And this was my first book. And I had put my manuscript in a drawer and gone on to work on poetry because I'm also a poet. But this Washington Writers Publishing House was just a boon, just a fabulous thing for me.
So there are lots of resources in the chat and good suggestions. Caroline noted to make sure that you read books from the press that you're looking to submit to. If you're looking at Washington Writers Publishing House, she put in a link to the affiliate page on Bookshop. It's important to get to have a good sense of what they publish and if your book fits there. So we have a couple minutes left. I was wondering if you could each talk about some books that really moved you to write, and they might be craft books, they might be some other memoirs or other genres that you've read that really helped you on this path.
I think I already talked about Educated by Tara Westover, and what is just compelling story, but her courage with writing about her family while everybody is still alive and talking about what she went through. There's a book about a family that is very to, religious, and they're kind of, what do you call people who live outside of society? And she was kind of trapped in that family, and her story of how she got out of it and got herself educated both literally and figuratively is just very compelling. But for me, the fact that she wrote honestly and said, this is my story and I'm telling it the way I want to tell it, I think is also very was one of the things that helped me. And the other was a book called Heavy by, and I don't know if I can pronounce his first name correctly, Kaisi Lehman. Carolyn, if you know how to pronounce it, you can tell people. Kaisi Lehman. And this was the story of him dealing with just his extreme weight being in society. And it was just a story about how you share your vulnerabilities very, very openly. And I think that one also had a very big effect on me as I tried to write my book. Also, the titles. I had a very long title. I can't, my battle with kidney disease as an African American woman in America, or something like that. And the editors at Washington Writers Publishing House, they thought it should be shorter, but they kind of wanted to make sure that I identified, with it. These two books, Educated and Heavy, that one word title really had an impact on me and helped me, and also in discussion with other people, come up with just that one word transplant that kind of hits you as a title. And so that was also very helpful.
I've dropped a bunch in the chat actually. So the first one is called Meander Spiral Explode. And that is a book about kind of non-traditional structure in nonfiction that really helped me think about how to craft like a braided essay or a lyric essay that incorporated personal stuff, but also political and current events and things like that. A Harp in the Stars is a kind of an anthology of lyric essays. For me, I think the best book that I have read about post-traumatic stress disorder is this one called The Evil Hours by a journalist writer named David J. Morris. This is the only book that he's written, and I don't know what he's up to right now. I actually approached him for a blurb and never heard back again. But was like, I love your book, and it changed my life and everything. And he just didn't, whatever. But I think takes the like a historical and sort of literary look at the phenomenon of post-traumatic stress disorder that I thought was it's really kind of unlike anything else that's out there about that phenomenon. And then one of the other ones that I linked to is a book called The Still Point of the Turning World by Emily Rapp Black. And Emily has a book. She actually has a manuscript consulting company, and I'll find that in a second and put that in there. It's called Circe Consulting, or Chloe, if you want to find it. But I felt like her work was basically what I aspire to, in that it's deeply, deeply personal, and it is intense and raw and draws from literature, travel, poetry. Like she's pulling together all of these different things, and telling the story of her child's terminal illness. Like this book is about her son who had Tay-Sachs disease, and how do you raise a child? This was her, I think I was introduced to her. She had an op-ed in the New York Times a long time ago about how do you raise a child who has no future? How do you raise a child who is going to die? There is no way out of this. You are basically caring for your child until he dies. And I just thought, how does anyone write about that? And she'll show you how to write about that. So,
yeah. So many great reading recommendations. They're in the chat. You can open them up. I'll also save some of them into the description that I'll put onto the YouTube recording. Thank you guys so much for coming. If everyone would like to unmute and offer some applause.
Thank you so much.